Hey, you! Yeah, you. Do you love shooting off giant beams of destruction? Then you're going to love this build. This build is a Lance build. I try to put as many Lance abilities and consoles on here as possible in order to just always be shooting out giant beams that kill everything in front of them. So, I decided to put this build on the Trailblazer because apart from this ship being the prettiest ship in the game, and that is a hill I would be prepared to die on, it is one of a few ships that comes equipped with its own innate weapon. In this case, it is an Agony Phaser's Final Lance, and this does a lot of phaser damage in 2 quick blasts. Basically, if something isn't dead by the time you've finished firing on it, it's going to be very close to it. Some other ships you could put this build on, the Lexington comes to mind. That is a very powerful ship. It only has a 4-4 weapons layout, but I'm sure you could find something to do with that. Any of the Galaxy Dreadnoughts, those all that come equipped with their own Spinal Lances, they aren't the Agony version, so they won't do the extra bonus phaser damage over each second for 15 seconds like the Agony phasers do. The Anoraks, you could possibly put it on. I know the Anoraks comes equipped with its own weapon, I'm not entirely sure what that is. Oh, the Chekhov Intel Science Warship. That doesn't fire off a conventional beam like all the others do, but the Graviton Tunneling Lancer that it does have is very good for controlling where your enemies are, and also does quite a lot of physical damage as well. Despite the sheer number of Phaser Lances that I managed to stick on this build, unfortunately I cannot keep my Phaser Lances at 100% of the time, so I decided to stick a Beam Overload build on this ship as well. And if I open it up, first thing you're going to notice is that there are 2 torpedoes in this setup. Usually with a Beam Overload build you want to only use 1, if that many torpedoes, but the reason why I've got 2 is because of set bonuses that I've got with both of them, which allow me to fire off more Lancers, so they stay. So the first torpedo I have selected here is the Parvin Proton Energy Torpedo Launcher, which is from this year's current event campaign as I'm recording this. It's a unique torpedo. It deals proton damage, which it should be obvious, it's kind of in the name, but there are certain examples where that isn't true. Does a fair bit of proton damage, gives resonance charge to targets, which allows them to take even more proton damage. Oh, and it's one of a few torpedoes in the game that's actually a wide-angle torpedo, so it actually has a 180-degree firing arc, so that's pretty neat. I think this is the 5th torpedo in the game, although one of the torpedoes you cannot get anymore, so yeah, there's that. The next torpedo I have slotted is the Quantum Phase Torpedo, which you can get from the Sunrise episode in the Future-Proof arc. It is right here. It's a quantum torpedo that deals additional shield drain whenever you hit somebody with them. It's pretty useful for the lower end, although the shield drain can still be useful for the higher end. The reason why I have it on here is for its 3-piece for the Quantum Phase Catalyst set, which is also including the Quantum Phase Beam Array and the, what's this called again? The Quantum Phase Converter. The 3-piece of this beam allows me to fire off the Quantum Destabilizing Beam, which is just a continuous beam of phaser damage and also implies some subsystem drain from your enemies and puts it onto yourself. And apparently this is also giving me firing cycle haste. That I don't think that's supposed to be. That might actually be a bug. I'm going to report that after this video. Next up I have the Agony Phaser Dual Beam Bank. This is a fairly hard-hitting dual beam bank. You could also use the Discovery Wide Angle Dual Heavy Beam Bank that you can get from the Discovery Legends reputation. The reason why I don't have it on this build is I like my orange phaser beams. It feels a lot more suited to 25th century starships, and honestly I just prefer the theme over anything else. And of course, no Phaser Beam Overload build would be complete without the Terran Task Force Phaser Beam Array. Possibly the hardest hitting energy weapon that you can get in the game because it deals more damage as your target self decreases. Basically, you're kicking them while they're down, and I'm all for that. If you're observant, you may have noticed that I'm using 3 pieces of my core gear that I used in my last video, and that is 3 pieces from a Revolutionary set, which allows me to fire off the giant mushroom gun, and if I just fire it off here, you can see where I already want it. Giant laser. Love it. And I would go for the 4-piece, but this build needs powering auxiliary, which I'll get into later. So I decided to use the competitive engines to give me an extra speed boost whenever I activate a weapon firing mode. Okay, the secondary deflector is just a standard deteriorating secondary deflector, nothing interesting about that. So let's move on to the arc weapons. I've just got a standard omnidirectional phaser beam array. I would prefer this if it was an agony or an obliviating omni beam array, but I don't have any of those right now, so this will do. I've got the quantum phase beam array that I talked about earlier, and the omnidirectional Parvin proton beam array. Now, this is the second piece of the Parvo set. I'll get into the 3-piece when I get down to its console. This Omni Beam Array is unique in that it also benefits from cannon firing mode, so if you're using a cannon scatter volley build for this build, I have absolutely no idea why you would, but you could if you would. This will give cannon scatter volley will give fire at will to this Omni Beam Array. And when this is firing, it has a 33% chance to add resonance charge to a target, and that just allows them to take even more proton damage. Onto my device slots, and the first device I have here is the Advanced Energy Amplifier, which gives me some more bonus energy weapon damage and also some shield penetration. Deuterium Surplus if I need a quick boost of speed but I don't have evasive maneuvers. The Kobayashi Maru Transport, which gives me a certain buzz whenever I activate it. It's either 10% bonus damage, 10% max hull, 20 damage resistance rating, 20% max shields, or 20% speed and turn. Large engine batteries. This will just allow me to just put my engine power all the way. This allows me to just put my engine power all the way up to the max whenever I need it. And since I've got all my power and weapons and auxiliary, I do kind of need that. And reactive armor catalyst in case I need a quick heal. In my universal consoles, I just have 2 phaser iso mags in order to boost up my weapon damage as much as possible, and also to buff my weapon power since I'm kind of starved for that. Next up, I have Experimental Power Redirection, which comes from the Excelsior 2, and this, whenever I click it, it just allows me to shoot all beams in every freaking direction. Everything around me just starts exploding. This console is so much fun. This is probably the best console in the game ever if you want to just have that fun factor. I really love it, and you will too. Next up, we have the Fusion Cutting Beam, which comes from the Chekhov Intel Science Warship, although I call this console the Arson Beam, because what it does is it shoots out a beam of fire that sets everything in front of you ablaze. It's just so fun to watch your enemies cook. Here we have the Parvin Crystal Battery, which comes from the current event as of recording this, which is the Parallel to Parvo event, I think it's called. It has some useful passives, minus shared cooldown and cannon firing modes, a little bit of firing cycle haste, and a decent amount of proton damage. It also happens to be the 3rd piece for the Parvin Proton Super Weaponry set. The reason why I'm talking about it nearly the last is because as I'm recording this set is currently bugged. The two piece allows you to shoot off a giant planetary proton laser beam from Parvo, and it just deals a bunch of proton damage, and just after 4 seconds it just explodes with even more proton damage. It's the 3-piece that is bugged because it reduces the recharge of Parvin Distillable Barnet Beam by half. The problem is, it's cutting everything's recharge rate in half. Like, it's cutting weapon firing modes in half, it's cutting bridge officer abilities in half, set bonus abilities in half. Hell, even the weapons themselves, they're being cut in half. Usually you have a recharge time of 1 second on the Agony Phase Dual Beanbag. It's 0.48 because of the haste from this console, and also the 3-piece cutting everything in half. So Cryptic does need to fix that soon. Next we have Refracting Energy Shunt, which comes from the Gagarin Miracle Worker Battle Cruiser, and what this does is just shoots out a beam of proton damage as well. That's actually kind of convenient. But yeah, it shoots out a beam of proton damage that can just lance out to all other enemies within 4 kilometers. It just looks really cool. Next we have the Immolating Phaser Lance. This is the Lance console. It just shoots out a giant beam of phaser damage, and it can just shoot it off really quickly because it actually has 6 charges, and it refills once every 20 seconds. Ignore the 2.5 second recharge, that's also been cut in half by the Parvo set. Here we have the Quantum Field Focus Controller, which comes from the Aventine Multi-Mission Reconnaissance Explorer, which is from the C-Store. Yeah, it's under the Tier 5 list. It's one of the Vestas. And what this does, it's very similar to the Quantum Destabilizer Beam, where it just a continuous beam of phaser damage. That's not right. Continuous beam of phaser damage. And this is the reason why I have my aux power maxed out. It's because that this console weirdly scales with your auxiliary power, not with your weapon power. Here we have the Variable Assault Deflector Array, which comes from the Inquiry Battlecruiser or the legendary Avenger Miracle Worker Battlecruiser. And what this does is it shoots out a giant cone of phaser damage. Huge. It's gonna hit a whole hell of a lot of people. And it also allows your shields, front forward shields, to heal a bit of damage that they take, so that's pretty neat. And this is the Isometric Dispersal Array, which comes from the Brigade Multi-Mission Surveillance Explorer, which is one of the Tier 6 Vesties. There's a lot of Vesties in this build. But yeah, here it is. It's a pretty ship. And what this console does is just shoots out a giant beam of lightning. I used it for my Total Discovery build. It does a decent amount of electrical damage. It's quite a good console, honestly. Okay, we talked about the Quantum Phase Converter. Oh, the hyper-focusing trinary arrays. These come from the Recon Destroyers. One of them, I own the Lafayette. What this does is just shoots out 3 giant beams of radiation damage that slowly just center in towards the target. Deals a bit of radiation damage, but the main point of this console, apart from fitting the theme of the build itself, is it also gives a nice amount of minus damage resistance rating to the person who you're targeting. In this case being minus 75% all damage resistance ratings. That's a lot of debuff. The last console I have here is the Cutting Tractor Beam, which you can get from the Infinity boxes, and you can also purchase them on the exchange for relatively cheap. And the reason why I have this console in this build is because of its passive. Activating a Universal Console adds 10% bonus damage to other Universal Consoles for 25 seconds, which stacks up to 10 times. Which includes me activating the Immolating Phaser Lance, which I can shoot off really quickly, even more quickly thanks to the Bugged Parvo set. So my thinking is, if I keep shooting off the Immolating Phaser Lance, then I activate all of my other Lance abilities, those Lance abilities are going to be doing even more damage to up to ridiculous amounts. For my specializations, I've got Temporal Primary to gain access to continuity, which allows me to survive anything that's going to kill me once every 2 minutes, I think it is. And Miracle Worker Secondary to gain access to the 50% of maximum hull regeneration. On my personal space traits, and the first one I have slotted here is Adaptive Offense, which gives me a crit chance that turns into crit severity every time I get a critical strike and then back. Inspirational Leader, which gives me increased skills whenever I use Bridge Officer abilities, although it's only a 10% chance. Context of the Kings, it gives me either damage resistance rating or bonus damage whether I got hit in the past second or not. The Boimler effect to help my cooldowns, although I don't really need this with Improved Photonic Officer plus the Bugged Parvo set. Fleet Coordinator, which gives me more bonus damage per member of my team, which includes yourself. Intelligence Attaché, whenever I crit strike, I restore 2% of my Captain ability recharge. Unconventional Systems, whenever I use a Control Bridge Officer ability, it gives me more recharge to my Universal Consoles, which allows me to keep my Lances up even more. Superior Beam Training, this just allows my beams to deal even more damage. Terran Targeting Systems, which gives me additional crit severity. And A Good Day to Die, which allows me to use the Captain's ability A Good Day to Die whenever I want. In my Starship traits, first I have Temporal Tunneling, which comes from the Atlantis Temporal Destroyer, and this just gives me a crap ton of haste whenever I activate an Exotic or Temporal Officer Bridge Officer ability. Next I have Super Weapon Ingenuity, which just allows me to keep beam overload up 100% of the time, assuming it doesn't misfire. And Best Hope for the Empire, this allows me to deal a bonus or damage and get temporary hit points every time I activate beam overload or lance abilities. Now, some fun things about this trait, it doesn't just activate from your innate lance abilities, this also activates from certain consoles, and the consoles I'm known to activate from is Immolating Phaser Lance, Isometric Dispersal Array, and there is one more I can't... Variable Assault Deflector Array, you know, this giant phaser. That's why you see me get temporary hull whenever I fired it earlier. Improved Photonic Officer, this just keeps my recharge times for my bridge abilities down to as low as possible. It also gives just some nice bonuses to shield healing, hull healing, and exotic damage. Universal Designs, whenever I activate a Universal Console I get extra crit chance and crit severity. This is mainly being triggered from Immolating Phaser Lance. emergency weapon cycle to reduce the weapon power cost of my whenever I fire my beams, and also gives me some extra firing cycle haste. And finally, subsystem redundancies, which gives me some extra shield regeneration and shield resistance whenever I use beam overload or lance abilities as well. My space reputation traits, first I've got Tyler's Duality, which gives me an extra crit chance based on my current hull capacity. Energy Refrequencer, I receive some 45% of my outgoing damage as a hull heal. Magnified Firepower, which gives me some bonus weapon damage. Precision, which gives me extra crit chance. And Advanced Targeting System, which gives me extra crit severity. In my bridge officer stations, first I've got Structural Analysis, Charge Particle Burst, Tachyon Beam, Destabilize, and Resonance Beam, and those just spread my secondary deflect damage all over the place. I've got Photonic Officer here, which is improving the recharge from my bridge officer abilities. I've got Tractor Beam Repulsors and Gravity Well here to trigger unconventional systems, and I'm pretty sure both of them also trigger temporal tunneling. I've also got Destabilized Warp Core and Narrow Sense Bands, those are the Miracle Worker bridge officer abilities. I've got Destabilized Warp Core to also trigger temporal tunneling, and plus the Warp Core explosion from that whenever you defeat the enemy afflicted by that is just incredibly satisfying. And I've got Narrow Sense Bands here just to give me improved damage the closer I am to an enemy. I've got Emergency Powdered Weapons here just to trigger emergency weapon cycle and also to give you some extra weapon damage. And finally, my tactical seat. First I've got Beam Overload 3, this is a Beam Overload build, that's kind of obvious. I've got Torpedo High Yield Spray because I just feel like this is a single target build, it feels weird to have Torpedo spread. And finally I've got Cumicite Lace Weaponry Run to get an extra bit of radiation damage, although for some reason this trait, despite doing radiation damage, does not trigger temporal tunneling. For my duty officers, first I have 3 energy weapons officers that give me extra crit severity whenever I fire an energy weapon. I've got a projectile weapons officer that does the same thing, except it's only when I fire projectiles. I've got 29 and 47, which whenever I use a science ability I have a chance to set my power levels to maximum for 5 seconds. And whenever I use a Miracle Worker ability, there's a 30% chance to improve my exotic damage by 25% for 30 seconds. And finally I have Tova Vera, which you get from the Fleet Spire, and basically what this duty officer does is it turns the push factor from your Tractor Beam Repulsors into a pull, so you get to pull enemies closer to you, hug them, and then blow them to bits. So, now that I've shown you what this build looks like, let me take you through a run of ISC and then I'll show you the pass.
Scanning the Deadite trenches. Start.
looking at the past now, and you can see that I've actually gotten 195k DPS, which, considering how long this ISC actually went for, that's rather impressive. I'm actually kind of impressed at how well this build performed. And although do note that most of that damage isn't actually going to be around normal day-to-day use, because again, we've got the bugged Parvo set. My number one damage dealer was actually my deteriorating secondary deflector, probably because of the sheer amount of triggers I have for it. In fact, looking back, I could probably replace some of those with unconventional systems triggers. Immediately underneath that, we've got the Immolating Phaser Lance with 23k DPS. This console is so powerful because of just the sheer rapidity of that you could fire it. And plus, it just deals a lot of damage on its own anyway, even without universal designs. The pets that would come from the Mushroom Gun's Mycelial Rift thing, and also the Weaponized Bulb Generator. And then we've got the Beam Overloads, the Terran Task Force Phaser Array, that did obviously the most damage out of my beam weapons. And then we've got the Phaser Rate, Overload 3, that's actually from the Omni Beam that I have in the back. And we've got Gravity Well. And then we got Quantum Field Focus Phaser, which did 7k, and Quantum Destabilizing Beam underneath that, which did 5k. That's not bad for a couple of consoles, although there are definitely better ones. And underneath that, we've got the Mushroom Gun, which had a max one hit of 490,000 damage. Usually, well, not usually, but with most science builds, you should be able to get that up to at least a 2 million one hit, but whatever. And then down, got Parvin into Silver Bombardment, that did 4k. That was the giant planetary laser that I was really hyped up for. It turns out not to do all that much damage. And then we've got Auxiliary Phaser Beam Array Overload at Will 3. That's from the Excelsior 2 console. And then we've got Hyper Focusing Trinary Arrays, that didn't do a whole lot of damage. And then way down at the bottom, Agony Phaser Spinal Lance with 2k, and Isometric Discharge Array with 1k. That's kind of pitiful. So, looking back at it, this build is certainly viable for normal and advanced content, not so much for elite, but you could definitely get around every day using this build. So, this was my Fire the Lancers build. I hope you enjoyed learning about it, and that maybe you might embrace the chaos that this build will summon. Please do remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content, it'd mean the world to me. Oh, and I have a Twitter account that I'll link down in the description. Feel free to follow me to catch up on what I'm saying. So, I hope that you all have an amazing day, stay cute, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye!